in this search that I did with a lot of difficulty to try and find different talking points. One of the things I came across from, I think maybe about 2018, was a white paper where you were the co-author.
Yeah.
It was called The Great Enabler, Aerospace in Africa. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, how did the idea come about? You know, how long did it take you and your co-author to do this, and how was it received?
Have you read it?
I've read parts of it.
Okay.
There's elements of it that they touch a lot on what is my day job, which makes it a little bit harder to read because I'm like, I do this all the time.
And you heard it probably a million times.
Yeah, but I mean, I was aligned with most of the messages in it, and I think it's the messages within that paper tie a lot to why I'm doing this, why Africans in aviation exist.
Really
so I just wanted your thoughts about what led you to that and how you engaged with it, because this was done not for you as an individual, but within the auspices of your job.
It was done within my job, but it was also done, I did not want it to be just a company thing, because it can't be. It's an entire ecosystem who sustains the industry, and I think if we were to write anything, it had to be a kind of a collective work. So the way it kind of came about was the way a lot of our conversations for the industry come about. It was many conversations I had with my co-author and ex-colleague as well, Ilunga Mpiana. And it was a lot of the conversations we had on aviation and some of the challenges and what is actually hindering its growth and what do we need to focus on, and really kind of looked at it from a detailed perspective. It's like, maybe we're looking at the bigger things rather than looking at the detail. Maybe sometimes small incremental progress really makes the biggest breakthroughs. So we kind of steered away from looking at it from a product point of view, and focused more on, what are the challenges as a whole on the continent, and how can aviation or aerospace at large be a response or a solution to those problems. So like I said, keeping products aside, we looked at things like agriculture, we looked at healthcare, we looked obviously at aviation and everything that aviation enables, trade, tourism and so on, and but then also in industrialization, manufacturing and so on, and to each one of these challenges, we looked at, does the aerospace industry have a response for that? Does it have a solution for it? And it did. It really did. We're talking about healthcare, and I'm sure you've seen that in a couple of countries in Africa, like drones for healthcare delivery, so medicine delivery, blood delivery, and so on. Air ambulances, we realized it's actually a huge problem sometimes getting the adequate urgent care to some remote places, so air ambulances, but then agriculture, which is probably the most untapped potential on the continent, and where satellite could help, where drones can help. So, and I think aviation is the most relevant, or not the most relevant, but the most obvious, because of tourism and people have access to it, to traveling, to planes and so on. But also industrialization and manufacturing. How can Africa also continue, because it is today, but grow into not only becoming a consumer of aerospace products, but also, why not, a supplier, a manufacturer, and so forth. So that's how we really came. It wasn't, we're going to write a white paper. It was about, let's look at it and try to kind of maybe tell a story of problem and solution rather than here's a product. And behind it was also for me to take it, like I said earlier, I like to be able to take stories to people. I want, everyone to be able to understand it and also understand how it impacts their daily life. So for me, it was about explaining how all these elements have a direct effect on how we live and how your country or the continent at large is developing. So it was kind of a breaking down these elements that sometimes feel like so technical or so difficult to understand, when in reality it's not. The reason why your government is investing in satellite is because you get a better agriculture for it. The reason why we're looking into policies around drones is because everyone does not have to live in the city, and you can still live in your rural areas and still have access to medical and so on and so forth. So for me, it was really bringing it closer to the people and understanding how an entire industry impacts their daily life, and the fact that it's also important that they are interested in it. So that's how we really came about. It took quite a long time. It took a year, almost a year, I would say, a little less probably than a year, to write it. And it was done, like I said, I didn't want it to be a us thing or a company thing. I really wanted it to be an industry thing. And I think we spoke to over 30 people across the board, from airlines to institutions to be it government or non-government. We spoke to entrepreneurs. We spoke to people like the Red Cross as well, healthcare professionals, and so on and so forth. And it was initiated by us, but I really like to think that it was a collective effort of the kind of entire ecosystem in the industry, that we were trying to give voice, but also educate us all on it. I really, for someone who doesn't know anything about aviation in Africa, and I'm not sure if you would agree, but I think it's a good starting point of kind of understanding.
I think it is.
What it is and what it means. It was also a lot of our stereotypes. One of the biggest stereotypes was that most of the travelers and tourism in Africa are non-Africans, meaning coming from the outside. Speaking with organizations such as the World Tourism Organization, the biggest the biggest influx of tourism in Africa are still Africans visiting their neighboring countries or not their neighboring. So it was intra-African tourism, and I think if you would ask anyone, I bet you most of the people will tell you, well, it's the world coming to Africa rather than African moving and visiting the continent, which for me was a huge tell in terms of what needed to be developed. And that's what it was. It was like, what does that tell me? It tells us that connectivity is key, because aviation in Africa has to be not only by Africans, but it has to also be for Africans.
Agreed.
And if you can't go from, I don't know, Kenya to Rwanda very easily, if that becomes a challenge, or I don't know, if you cannot travel from Kenya to Senegal, if it's easier for you to go from, I don't know, Kenya to New York rather than Kenya to Senegal, that's problematic.
That's an issue that needs to be addressed. Agreed.